Hi everybody, welcome to the South Australian Sports Show. I hope you can stay with us for the next hour. Co-host for this special show, Greg Anderson, because it's got to be footy. Finals are coming, so we bring in the experts for the big game. Ando, how are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Well, it wasn't much of a footy effort last week. I thought, thought they would beat Essendon at home, and that was just such a dreadful game. The Crows ended the season off beautifully, as we know, and I think, but unfortunately, they both finished out of the top 8, and that's it. It's all over. It's all over.
Just before we try and dissect the Crows and the Power v Essendon, you've had a foot in both camps. When the game goes on, are you going for someone, or is it?
Well, probably at the end of the game, I was certainly going for Essendon, but at the start, I was certainly going. It's hard to take the port out of the boy. I mean, I love my time at the Bombers, but I grew up being a port supporter my whole life. So it's. My father played about 70 reserve games for Port. My grandfather played Colts. My uncle played Colts. So real Port people. So and I was really disappointed because I thought that they had everything to play for, and they just unfortunately it didn't give a whimper from word go. I mean, when Essendon had a ruckman, they were 7 goals down. Essendon didn't even play with a ruckman in the second half. They played with Stringer and another lad who was about 6'1", and they still couldn't get the win. So losing by 3 or 4 goals was pretty disappointing.
So everyone sits on the outside and has an opinion, mate. Port obviously disappointing the last third of the season, or a little bit after a third. Where did it go wrong from where you sat for Port Adelaide this year? I just think their work rate dropped off. I didn't see there was 1, 2, 3, 4 players that I don't want to, that were just working so hard to help support the back line and get numbers back, and that's today's footy. I just didn't see that the last, it's probably 6 or 7 weeks, and the West Coast is a perfect example. They turned the ball over, and they actually got 2 easy goals when the Power were 3 goals up. They should never have been in that position. They just didn't work hard enough for each other in that second half of the season. All right, the Crows have a win in their last game, but finish under the Power on the ladder. And of course, the last couple of days have been interesting in Adelaide, in that people have been after Port Adelaide because of the way they performed. Yet the Crows finished below them, and because they had the win, it's kind of let them get away with it right up until Monday night. Monday night, collective minds come out and make their statement on how they saw the pre-season camp. Then it has just gone pear-shaped everywhere after that. What do you read into all of that?
Look, I mean, as a spectator, I thought the Crows had a pretty average pre-season. They had blokes still having operations. It seemed that they just always a bit of a hangover from the grand final, and losing grand final. I've been there. It takes a lot to get off the canvas, and I thought they slowed. They started very slowly, and then they got injuries. Then they got their team back together. They were hard to beat. Their second half was, and then of course we hear more reasons why they did start slowly, and hasn't that exploded? You hear things from players, you hear things from coaches, support staff, their side of things. It's like a whole barrel full of crap in my eyes.
Well,
You've got to get the points.
I'm wondering how much is fact and how much is fiction on what you hear.
Everyone blames each other, and that's life, and they're all pointing at each other. But at the end of the day, they didn't get enough points to get in the final 8. I still think you lose McGovern, you lose so many players during the year with injuries. Sloan,
massive loss.
Sloan's 36-7. Matty Crouch. There's injuries with some of the real high level performers. And you could see when they get back, the work rate they put in that second half of the season, pushing back to support, it was a complete sort of opposite of what Port senior players were perhaps doing.
If neither team could recruit and they didn't lose anything, who's got the bigger upside next season? Crows
I actually think that the Crows have myself. I think they play probably a brand of footy that, and when they're playing their full list, they're hard to beat. With that list, they're a grand final side, and we know that list can play in a grand final. And they played some of it, towards the end of the year. So I think that's the upside. What worries me, I went to the game on Friday night, and I was going to be very critical on Polak to see, is he as good as everyone is saying he is? And he is that good. Yeah. He's that good, and he's going to be a massive loss if he goes to North Melbourne. They just got to throw whatever they can to keep him, because his work rate, I mean, the number of ball he got back because he pushed back so hard to and that's a numbers game now, with football. Very, very good player and speed.
Well, mate, I sat at my mum's and watched the netball final on the weekend. The daughters all around, 12,000 people at the game. Hasn't netball just exploded for TV? It's interesting to watch them with timeouts now, because I remember in my time at the Institute talking to the Australian coaches there, and they were never going to have timeouts. And the big argument was, of course, if you don't have timeouts, can't have TV because can't get the ads in. So, of course, now they have the timeouts. 12,000 people at the game. Great spectacle on TV. Yeah. Fantastic for women's sport.
It's fantastic. Look, I went to one of the grand finals a couple of years ago. I took my daughters and the Adelaide won, which was fantastic. There was probably 10,000 there. It was capacity, and it's such an exciting sport. And look, it's the highest participating sport in Australia. So it's got a lot to hang its hat on, that's for sure. And there's some big girls that play now. I mean, they're not like 5'10". We're talking 6'3", 6'4", and can run, and the agility. Wow, what do they have for breakfast?
Jiva Mentor is still my favourite, mate. I always admire the defenders. And we talk about some top shelf stuff on the show coming up. James Fantasia is going to join us, of course, the CEO of the Norwood Footy Club. Talk about the SANFL finals. Steve Marotti from the South Australian Athletics is going to come in for a chat. The Southern Footy League, their final start. Craig Warman's in the pres.
Cove no good. Cove no good. We didn't make it. Disappointing.
Well, Cove were disappointing, mate. Jeff Baines has just been appointed CEO of Squash.
Fantastic.
So we'll catch up with Baines and find out what's happening with Squash. So time to get all the sporting news now. Over to Bridget.
Thanks, boys. Here's this week's news. The Crows and the Power have played their last games of 2018. Both teams struggled to live up to high expectations. The Crows will finish 12th on the ladder, despite a strong win over Carlton. Port Adelaide will not play the finals after a loss on home turf against Essendon. Riverland local Aaron Francis was influential for the Bombers. He has made a strong case for best on ground and took one of the marks of the year. Staying with the AFL, legendary small forward Thomas Lindsay has called time on his decorated football career. Thomas, who hails from Mallee Park, played for South Australia in the under-18s before being drafted by the Kangaroos. 11 years later, Thomas returned, representing Port Adelaide in the AFL and SANFL this year. Congratulations to one of the most entertaining small forwards of the game. Adelaide Bite legend Stephen Welch is making a comeback to the Diamond for the upcoming ABL season. His return comes after a year away from the game. The legendary number 22 holds almost every club record for Adelaide. He leads in most home runs, hits and runs batted in. The ABL star will lead a young Adelaide side this upcoming season. It boasts the likes of Aaron Whitefield and Mitch Edwards. Bite is the strongest team heading into the season and will be eyeing off their first championship. The SA Super League's ladder has been finalised after a gripping string of games in round 7. The Hyson Comets retain their top position after a tight win against the Eastern Raiders but missed qualifying for finals. The Comets will take on the Spartans in the semi-final, while the Knights and the Chargers will fight the elimination round. Both matchups are underway tonight as the Salisbury Bowling Club looks to find its 2 grand finalists for the championship. Australian cross-country championships were underway over the weekend as South Australia made history. Led by Riley Cox, the SA men claimed the gold title for the first time. They have ended Victoria's 8-year winning streak. Caitlin Adams has claimed the first silver medal in the Open Women's Cross-Country Championships. She snatched the under-23 title in the process. The athletes will be happy coming home after a monumental day for South Aussies on the track. Red Bull Air Racing champion Matt Hall finished 9th in the qualifying round. This is despite a track record time in the final practice just a day before. His bad luck continued on race day after clipping a pylon, incurring a 3-second penalty and knocking him out of the race. Not a great day in Russia for Matt, falling to 3rd in the World Championship standings. That's all for this week. Back to you guys.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bridget. Time to turn our attention, Ando, to the Southern Footy League. As always, the Prez, Craig Warman in. Craig, thanks for coming in, mate.
Our pleasure, thank you.
Mate, there were some big scores on the weekend. Big weekend coming up. So let's get to last weekend's round as the teams fine-tune themselves into this weekend that's coming, mate.
Oh, no, forget the last.
Just scrap the last 18 weeks, gone.
Mate, we got a top 5.
Right.
We've now got a really, really interesting final series.
Well, you have got an interesting final series.
Coming up. But out of last week's games, the one that had to win with a substantial margin was Port Dalunga. and they finished up in third position, knocking Christie's out of the double chance, which is I think, is going to cost Christie's in the end.
And Norlunga's obviously ran home well as well. They've beaten
Yes.
Cove very convincingly, so they finished
Sorry
second.
about that, mate.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, anyway.
No, again...
It's been a tough year for Cove.
It has
We go
been
back to it, and we'll go back to the Cove just briefly. I love the club. I coached them.
The Anderson Curtin curse has certainly
we
paid
cursed them.
dividends this year.
I know we did, but
they've got a real lot of good talent down there, and again, it's part of a development process down there, bringing the younger group through to getting their 30 or 40 A-grade games.
Before we go into the finals, I mean, that's what you've been able to accomplish right throughout this season. Everyone that's playing in the competition, the clubs all look really well structured, and whether it's going to happen next year or the year after, the structure of each of those clubs is making the whole association very exciting.
Oh yeah, it's been terrific, and of course, prior to last weekend, the 3 weekends before that, we had our Manili carnivals, where we're getting about 2,500 participants each weekend in 8s, 10s, and 12s. Coming through the system. So Southern Footy League's alive and well with really good numbers.
Oh, the women's finals were on last weekend as well. While
Yes.
you're talking about that, how'd that finish up?
Yeah, it was terrific. Morpher Vale knocked off Ranella, so Billy won't be happy again. But the A-grade got the job done to maintain their position in the 5. And in the under-14 girls, O'Sullivan's Beach Lonsdale had a good win, and they progressed straight through to the grand final.
A couple of new clubs from last year in the women's league as well. So
Cove Footy Club is one of those.
Yep.
And in the senior women's, in the other game against Flagstaff Hill, they progressed straight to the grand final. So in their first year, they made the grand
Fantastic,
final. So
yeah. You think I was coaching them, really, weren't you?
Well, yeah.
I think you better stay away.
We wanted it. I mean, let's get on to the finals, because it's going to be a ripping weekend. Saturday, the first game, qualifying final. Noarlunga finished in second. They're up against Port Noarlunga in third. It's at Christie's Beach at 2:30. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking probably Noarlunga just.
That close?
Yeah, it is that close, because Porty's, again, still got that fire in the belly after what happened to them last year, and we all know about that. So this is their chance to make a little bit of an amends. They get over Noarlunga, they get a crack at Flaggies.
Is there a big gap between Flaggies and the other 4?
Flaggies,
It seems like it during the year.
Yeah, Flaggies, a bit like Norwood in the SANFL.
Okay.
They're just really well balanced. They've got players coming back that have now had their 2 or 3 games back from injury. Sam Smith in particular. Josh Vandermeer is another one. Both played association footy for the Southern Footy League. They're going to be really, really hard to beat. But in saying that, on their day, they have been beaten. So, and Port Noarlunga is the only team out of that group that's beaten everyone else.
Yeah. But the run in last week, both teams had big scores. I mean, both 25 plus goals scoring for both Port Noarlunga and Noarlunga, so they're clearly up and about and ready to go. Most of them have come through pretty injury-free.
Yep.
So you just sense it's going to be close.
This and it played on a big ground at Christie's Beach.
Yep.
I reckon that's probably going to suit Porties, because they're a little bit quicker across the ground than Noarlunga. Noarlunga have got a couple of old blokes, but then you throw in Nick Mott and Tommy Cordell up forward for Noarlunga. Gee, they don't want to get a chance, a sniff, and they can take the game away.
And similar ovals too, actually, Port Noarlunga and Christie's Beach, in the
size-wise,
size-wise. So yeah, it's going to certainly suit Port Noarlunga, even though I think Noarlunga have had a great year this year.
All right, let's not sit on the fence any longer, boys. Who's it going to be?
I reckon Noarlunga by
Noarlunga for
2
you?
goal.
For you?
I'm going Port Noarlunga. I think there's. I spoke to a few of the guys, and very similar to what you're saying. They've got a bit of fire in the belly. I mean, obviously that was what happened last year. Is very controversial. I'm not going to bring that up. But they felt like they were cheated out of a premiership, but at the end of the day, they've done they've got it there if they want it this year.
This could be the road to redemption.
Yeah.
All right, let's not talk about last year. Elimination final is Sunday, of course. Christie's Beach in 4th, Ranella in 5th. Ranella were devastating. 23 goals, 19 on the weekend. So my boys are back. Billy's up and about. We're not worried about any other results. This is the one that matters.
Well,
at Aldinga.
But we won't go back 2 weeks, will we?
We're not. No, we're going forward.
Right,
Don't look in the review.
okay.
Don't look in the review.
mirror. Ranella will win this, and I reckon we'll win it reasonably comfortably. Christie's, as we mentioned in the last couple of weeks, since about 4 or 5 weeks ago, they haven't been able to score enough goals. They can handle it to half time, but then after half time, they just rely too heavily on their smaller forwards breaking open the game, and they haven't been able to do it.
Where's Ranella improved so much over the last half of the season?
Oh, a bit like the Crows. They got a few of their big players back from injury.
Yep.
That helps when you've got blokes like Cody Ellison and Luke McEntee, both 6'5", that you can slot back into either forward or defence, or helping the young lad out, Chad Thompson, who's been carrying the burden of the ruck while in their absence. But if Ranella can get over Christie's, it sets up a really interesting final series for them. Unfortunately, they lost Damon Arnold a couple of weeks ago with a broken ankle. But in saying that, they've got a lot of good talent down at Ranella, and for Billy's sake, I reckon they'll get the chocolates.
Well, maybe surprised. I mean, we all thought Flagstaff would win, but the margin over Christie's Beach was probably the disturbing part for me leading into the finals. I mean, sometimes you rest players, but I mean that form slump it's a big slump to come in this weekend.
Well, it's a bit like Greg's Port Power, isn't it, really? They were sitting pretty in second position, had just knocked off Flagstaff Hill, had a couple of byes, association game, one of their key forwards got injured, haven't been able to recapture the form, and again, the games they did win were against the bottom half of the table, and they just don't seem to me to have enough firepower to get enough score on the board.
All right, so you're both going for Ranella?
I'm going for Christie's Beach.
You're going Christie's Beach?
I think
you are?
I think they got the players. As you said, just got to, they run out well. The preparation's good. There's no reason why that can't swing. The same personnel.
Yeah, exactly right.
Of course, it is worth noting, mate, that you went for Cove this year. As always, mate, thanks for coming in. Hopefully it's a great weekend of footy. No one gets injured and it'll be spectacular down there. Get down and support the Southern Footy League. Stay with us. Still a bit more to come on the show.